Hello, lovelies. Welcome to Horror 421, the podcast, with your hosts, special effects makeup artist supreme, Elena Morales, and your friendly small-town horror author, Charles Campbell. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the frights in this week's episode.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Horror 421, the podcast. I'm your host, Charles Campbell, and with me today is my beautiful co-host, Elena Morales. Say hello, Elena.
Hello, friends.
And we have a very special guest today. He's I would consider him a friend of the show. He's a friend of a friend, and we're glad to have him on today. His name is John Oak Dalton, and he's a movie director, producer, writer. He's done all kinds of stuff in the movie industry. So thank you for coming on the show today, John.
Hey, thank you for inviting me. I do enjoy your show. I've seen or listened to quite a few episodes now, so appreciate you giving me a chance to jump on.
Oh, yeah. Well, we're happy to have you. So we'll get started kind of the way we do a lot of our podcasts. Kind of tell the viewers and listeners a little bit about yourself, your background, and what got you into the horror movie business.
Again, my name is John Oak Dalton, and I guess I usually say that my first paycheck came from David Letterman, because when I was in college, I won a David Letterman scholarship from Ball State University, where David Letterman went. And I was the first person to win a Letterman scholarship based on a script. And that was in 1987. So I would say that's the first time I got paid for writing. But really how I got into the industry regularly was kind of a little sideways, maybe. My background was really television production and working in video production at a college, and worked at a public television station. I've worked in public access television. And I was actually working on a show like a minority public affairs show. And the person that was on that day was a movie director named Ivan Rogers from Indianapolis, and he's a whole show in himself. He has since passed away, but he was really the first person I met in the industry. I was directing or running camera, I forget what, on this, like a public affairs show. And afterwards I said, hey, do you want to get coffee? I'm interested in movies. I was like in my early 20s. He said, sure. And we went and had coffee, and that was sort of how I got introduced to kind of the B movie world. Ivan, really charismatic person. He knew martial arts, and he'd come up as a bodyguard and that kind of thing for some people in Hollywood. Like, he worked with Fred Williamson, and he had gone to high school in Indianapolis with, I'm going to draw a blank. The guy in Dawn of the Dead, the main guy. I'm drawing a blank on his name now.
Oh, that's okay. It'll come to you. I can't remember his name either.
So he, and he worked in that kind of thing, and he was an extra in some bigger movies, and he used that money to finance his own martial arts films. I think he originally started shooting in LA, but he eventually moved back to Indiana and did a couple there. And they're all shot on film. And really the last one he completed, when he was shooting it, it was shot on 16 millimeter with open edge numbers, and they were transferring that to VHS, and then they were editing the VHS with open film numbers, and then making one cut on the film, which was a lot cheaper. Well, they were kind of, I got to talking to Ivan, and they were needing help with some editing. Well, I was a very good videotape editor at the time. This is now the 90s. And so after hours, which I could say because I don't work there anymore, I would go in after hours and weekends with Ivan, and I'd edit a lot of his film on videotape. And then a film editor cut based on the cuts I made on videotape. And I got an assistant editor credit on that film. It's called Forgive Me, Father. And it's about it's one of those heartwarming tales of a of a hitman who goes straight and becomes a priest, but then his brother gets killed, so he has to go get revenge. It's one of those kind of things. And
I'm a
I never saw
fan.
anybody,
I'm already a fan.
I never saw anybody alive in the film until I went to the premiere in Indianapolis at a theater, because I worked on just the action scenes and things like that. So I didn't edit any dialogue scenes or anything. I just worked on action scenes. So I have an assistant editor credit on that. When it was over, Ivan wanted to settle up with me, and I was like, okay, I don't think I'm going to get a lot of movie editing jobs here in Indiana, but I think I can get screenwriting jobs, and that's really my first interest. So I won't charge you anything if you help me shop around and get a screenwriting gig. And he was good to his word. And he helped me get a gig with a producer named Jeff Griffiths. And I wrote a movie called Player in the Game, and it was in the trades, Variety and Hollywood Reporter, that it was going in pre-production. Back then, being in the trades, that was a big thing.
Right.
And I decided at that point, when that went into pre-production, I was done with my part of it, that I would write 100 letters to, maybe I should explain this to you, Elena. There used to be something called the post office that you wrote
I
letters
still
on
like
paper.
letters. I love
Okay.
letters.
I don't know if I had to explain this part. This was before like the internet, really. I mean,
This is a dying thing. I had a pen pal and everything. I thought I was the coolest. I was the hottest shit ever. I had like my own stationery. I was so excited about it when I could write letters. It was
all right. I didn't want to leave you out, if you didn't know what I was talking about. But my goal was write 100 letters, because John Kennedy Toole, when he wrote Confederacy of Dunces, one of the great novels of the 20th century, he had said he would write 100 letters, and when he got the 100th rejection, he was going to kill himself, which he did. That was not my plan, but the moral of that story is keep going, because John Kennedy Toole's mother ended up kept shopping that manuscript around, and eventually got picked up. And if you've never read A Confederacy of Dunces, it's by John Kennedy Toole. It's one of the great novels of the 20th century. So anyway, I was modeling myself on him. I was going to write 100 letters, and I did. I wrote 100 letters, and remember, I had something in the trades.
Right.
This like a film, not a direct-to-video, a film, and my name was in it. I actually had something going. So I was writing all these letters. Okay, now at the exact same time, I was working in video production at a college, and one of my students said, there's these movies I really think you should see. And they're by these guys named the Polonia Brothers. And I was like, I never heard of, these were made direct to the video market. I'd never heard of anything like that. I was in the movie side. I wasn't doing direct to video. I didn't really know much about it. So, I was like, yeah, I'll watch a couple of those. And I got really interested. The first one I watched from Mark Polonia is Blood Red Planet. And then I saw a movie called Drainiac from Brett Piper, and I saw Mark's name in the credits. And so I decided that I would, I'll just write a letter to Mark as well. And so I found out he worked at he worked at Mansfield University, where I worked at a college. He's about my age, all this. So I thought, I'll write him a letter. So I wrote 100 letters, and the only person that wrote me back was Mark Polonia. And, if you know the Polonia brothers, I mean, they've made 75, 80 movies. They were the first shot on SVHS movie ever accepted by Blockbuster. They've just had this incredible career of in the direct-to-video market, and they caught the wave at the right time. They got in the mom and pop wave of the 80s when there was so much demand. And then now we're in the late 90s, and all of a sudden the direct-to-DVD market is becoming very, very hungry for content. So I kind of jumped in at the right time. And Mark and I got to talking, and we tried to get one or two things off the ground that didn't work out. And then the other movie I was working on fell through. And one day Mark says, we're working on this Bigfoot movie. Would you do it for us, like a mockumentary style? Well, okay. So I kind of thought it'd be the last thing I ever worked on in the industry, really. And so I wrote kind of a send up of the B movie world, and they really, including Mark and John as characters, really. And they really ended up liking it. And I went out to the set in Pennsylvania where it was shot, because I'm working in television, so I thought, well, I can come out and help. So I come out as a PA and work on the set, and the movie's called Among Us. And while we're out there, the distributor calls Mark and says, hey, we need 3 more movies right away. And Mark turns to me and says, can you write 3 more movies right away? And I was like, no, I don't think so. Because I just didn't think I could write that fast. Now, fast forward to, that's like maybe 2000, 2001. So now fast forward to like, I don't know, maybe 2017 or 18. And Mark calls and says, I need 3 scripts, but I need them in like 6 weeks. And I'm like, yeah, that's no problem. Don't worry about it. But back then I was like, I don't think I could write 3 movies in a year. Now I'm writing I can really write a movie in 3 weeks, like from start to finish. But back then I didn't think I could, because I've done like 50 scripts. I mean, not all of them got turned into movies, but I've sold about 50 or more scripts.
Well, that's amazing to me. It really is. I'm just jumping in real quick, because as a writer, and we've had authors and we've had Henrik on the show, and some of the people that we've had on can put out so much entertainment in a year. And I struggle to get 2 books out a year. I mean, it's just my pace.
But I don't think I could do what you do, because my brain is not wired for fiction writing. I wish it was, because, as an aside, sort of, I think like the Kindle market, that market now, like the Amazon market, what's called self-publishing, although I wouldn't really call it that. It isn't what it was back then in the day. Right. It isn't. It's legitimized now. But I think that market now is the market that I broke into when digital was just going crazy, the direct-to-DVD market, and then streaming. That it's that market again, where there's a low entry point for people that, they like, when I first worked in television and to some degree film production, we held the keys to the kingdom, right? No one else could get in. We held the keys. And publishing was the same way. Well, then, with grassroots TV, microcinema, it became more democratized, and the price point became so that people could enter the marketplace and make movies and find a market for them. Right. And that's what's happened really with publishing. People can self-publish their own books on Kindle, and people are accepting of that. And there was a time that was not considered acceptable. So I wish I was wired more for that, because I think I could work more and be responsible for my own things, and not have to, and not be not part of a team. When you're writing a book, you're the main person. You're the main one to blame. When you write a movie, you're not the main person to blame. Everybody's to blame. Right. You're part of it. So I feel like if I was wired to write books, a lot of my B movie friends that have sort of drifted away from the industry since the 90s, that's what they've gone into. They started writing books and gotten into the Kindle market, or the self-publishing as it is. So I just have been in the right place to catch a couple waves. I mean, to be honest, when streaming started, I don't think it was really accessible. Like, I couldn't figure out how we could monetize it as B movie people, because Netflix ain't taking, my movies, stuff like that. So it took a while, but then, you've got, like a year ago, I didn't know there was a thing called Tubi. Yeah. And now, like, most of my career is on Tubi, right? Like, frankly, everything I've ever worked on is on Tubi. And I didn't even know there was a Tubi. But, the main platforms, Amazon kicked the legs out from under independent people. Netflix isn't taking them, Hulu's not taking them by and large. So we didn't have anything. And then all of a sudden there's Shudder, and there's Tubi, and there's, a million little Roku midnight
they're
hour.
They're popping up everywhere.
Yeah, they're popping up everywhere. And they're all, again, hungry for content. And I sort of had my eyes opened a little bit a year or two ago, because like that British movie Host, that was all done like in this kind of format. You know what I'm talking about?
Oh yeah, I've seen it.
Shaking her head. Yes, that movie. Like, it was all shot with webcams, and it was this, and that's fine with me. but it was only like an hour, and to me, like ingrained into me always was a movie has to be 75 minutes or it's not a movie. A feature is not 60 minutes. A feature is 75 minutes or longer. And so to me, I was like, why are they saying Host is a movie? Host isn't a movie. But somebody said to me, well, it's a piece of content. And that kind of opened my eyes. Like, something. Yeah, people don't care now. They're not really hung on that. So that's when I was like, okay, we can monetize the streaming platforms now. We'll find a way to do it. So a lot of people that I worked with over the years, the waves have risen and crested. And when they've bottomed out, people have left, but there's always been another wave. I mean, we had the mom and pop in the 80s, we had direct-to-DVD late 90s, early 2000s, and now, this time period we're in now, and I'm just counting the last couple of years. I'm not talking about the early days of Netflix and Amazon.
Yeah, streaming is really taken over, and in some ways, I'm kind of like the old curmudgeon because I still like physical media. So
me too.
I prefer to have a DVD or a video cassette in my hand.
Yeah.
See, and that's how I feel about books. And everybody who is my age now, they're like, why don't you have a Kindle? You read all of the time. Here's the thing. I like to hold the book. I like to smell the book. I want to see it on my shelf. It's an accomplishment. It's like an OCD thing. If I read it on the computer, I end up buying it anyway. It's just something in my head.
I agree.
And same with DVDs. I have so many. But I mean, like you said, it's not like it used to be. Like, because when I was younger, we used to go to Blockbuster all of the time. So to get the B movies there, or video to see by our house, that was actually how I got into the B movie horror. Because you'd find, like, if that wasn't on your list, you'd go to your next one. If that wasn't on your list, you go to the next one, and then you just find all of these gems whenever you had the sales on the DVDs or the VHSs people didn't want anymore. So that's kind of how I got into that. So, like you said, with streaming, it kind of takes away that fun of it, just a little bit.
But what you're saying, Charles, though, I think the publishing, like what you're doing, it's really been democratized by the digital world. And again, we're getting to the point where people don't care. They're getting it on their Kindle. It looks the same as everybody else's. So they don't really care that you did it yourself, where there was a time, excuse me, where if you were self-publishing, printing your own books, that was not considered legitimate. But people don't think like that anymore. So I think, I wish I could wire myself that way, because I'd be a lot more prolific even still, I think, if I could do that.
But. Yeah. Well, I'm happy with the self-publishing route so far. I mean, I can't quit my day job, but I'm doing okay with it. And
I don't know hardly anybody that has in the entire industry that has ever have been able to quit their day job. Not very many people.
Right. But and I've warned friends of mine who want to go the publishing route, and this is a warning to people listening out there who want to be authors and self-publish. Do not fall for the vanity publisher scams. Do not do it.
That's exactly right. The vanity publishers is what has the bad knock.
Yeah, and they are bad. And I've had a personal friend of mine lose thousands of dollars without much on his return. And he, told me, I wish I'd gone your route and just done it myself. And I was like, well, just don't give them any more money. Take control now. But
I guess if I would sum up my career, it would be that 3-picture deal I did with the Polonias back in the early 2000s. Because I told them at the time, I didn't think I could write 3 movies in a year. So John Polonia, who is also an incredibly prolific person, he has since, passed away, but he was the writer, and he had I went to his house and he had this whole box of scripts, handwritten scripts, like in notebooks and stuff, all kinds of things. And I took 2 of those and did a rewrite. And then I was going to write one of my own from scratch. So the first one I did the rewrite on was called Peter Rottentail. And it has been around forever. Every Easter, I get on Twitter and everything, and people are talking about it. Fangoria magazine, first time I was ever in Fangoria, they did an hour-long podcast about it. So, when I was a teenager thinking I'd be in Fangoria someday was pretty wild, even though they, obviously they thought it, not obviously, but they thought it sucked. Nerdly, which is a famous UK website for reviews, they put it in the top 10 list of worst horror films of all time, which is actually great because that makes people want to watch it. This 10 worst movies of all time. Okay, let's see what you got. So anyway, first one I did was Peter Rottentail, and that has stayed around forever. I did a live tweet thing with a group of people during COVID, a live tweet along when people were watching it, and I commented. So I mean, it's been around, and that was probably came out maybe, I'm not looking at IMDb right now, but I think it came out in 4, 5, 6 somewhere. So it's 15 years old. So that was the first one. Second rewrite I did was a movie called Razor Teeth, which was a piranha movie, and you don't hear a lick about it. It came out, you can't find reviews. Nobody seems to have seen it. So the third movie then was something that I wrote from scratch, and it was called Demons on a Dead End Street. They gave me the title, but I wrote the script. One of my favorite scripts didn't get made. So that to me is the B movie industry. You have one movie that comes out and people call it the worst movie of all time, but everybody sees it. One movie comes out, nobody's heard of it. That's actually worse than being called the worst of all time. And your third one doesn't get made. That's a pretty good summary of the B movie world. Although honestly, probably of all my scripts, probably a third, maybe close to half have been made. But you leave a lot of projects on the side of the road for various reasons. So anyway, that's a little bit about how I got started, I guess.
Well, that's awesome. I will say Elena just finished watching Scarecrow County. Was it yesterday?
Mm-hmm. And then today I watched Girl in the Crawl Space. Excuse me.
Yep.
Oh, thank you for watching those.
Well, we had Joni and John on a few weeks back, and we talked a little bit about their adventure on the Girl in the Crawl Space.
Yeah, that was nice of them to talk about it. I watched that episode.
Yeah, well, they did a great job, and Aaron did too. Well, they all did, and you did a great job too. But go ahead. I'll let you.
The truth of that is, so like in probably about 2017 or so, maybe even 16, I'd gone a long time without being offered anything I wanted to do, to write, or really to write anything at all. And I'd had a pretty long run, but I wasn't getting things I wanted to do, or I actually being offered to do much of anything. So I was sort of like, I should just write something. I never write on spec. I was just talking to a friend about this today, actually at lunch, saying, most of the movies I've written already came with a title. Most of them came with a poster. The first one I wrote for Henrik, Haunted House on Storia Road, the poster was done before we even started working on the movie. So, I don't write a lot just from spec, and sometimes there'll be an outline or a treatment, but sometimes I just go off and start writing. Oh, it's called Noah's Shark. Okay, I'll figure that out. So I thought, I'm just going to write a movie I want to watch, write my own script. And then it kind of morphed into, I'm going to write a movie I could make myself. I'm going to shoot it myself. So I wrote it to make it like I'm going to shoot at my own house. And if you see Girl in the Crawl Space, 80% of it was shot right here in my house.
That's an interesting nugget.
Yeah.
Did not know that.
I just started working on it. Like, I'm going to make this myself, and I'm going to call in every favor I've ever made in the B movie industry in the last 10 years, and so almost 20 years. And so I wrote it for myself, and but I started thinking about who I wanted to put in it when I was writing it. And that's why John Hambrick's character is called Johnny, because I wanted him to be Johnny. And Joni's character is kind of named after her. And then Erin wasn't. I named that character after Once Upon a Time in the West. The lead in that. That's why her name is Jill McBain. That's the woman in the actress.
Right.
So I didn't name her after Erin, but I really wrote it for Erin. For Aaron, John, and Joni is who I wanted to be in it. And crazily, they all agreed to come to my house and be in it. When I got it done, so when I'd worked with Henrik, he had told me, if you ever get a project going, I'll give you 5 days. I'll come over and shoot your movie. I'll help you produce it. My background was in television, but he said, I'll come over and help you. I'll bring my gear. I'll give you 5 days. So we shot that in 2 weekends mostly at my house. We shot 4 days at my house and then a Friday at another location, but it was almost entirely shot here. And they all came to the house, and they stayed overnight, most of them. And my real plan, my 100% goal was I would start going to conventions. I go to like Cinema Wasteland and Horror Hound, and I just sell it at a card table. I didn't think anybody'd want it because I wrote it from my interest, what I liked and was interested in. Didn't care what anybody else thought. Financed it myself. And I was probably more shocked than anybody when it was picked up by a distributor. Then it was in Family Video, Walmart, Amazon Streaming. It was everywhere. And that shocked me badly because I just didn't think that was going to happen.
Didn't expect it, right?
I did not expect it. I really thought I'd just sell it at conventions, and I wanted to have fun. And like I said, I shot it in 2 weekends. I worked with my really great friend, Henrik, who he was good to his word. He said, I will come and give you 2 weekends. And he did. And all the people I asked, I think John told a story about that actually on your show, but I basically did call him and say, I wrote this exactly for you. I hope you'll come and do it. And I called Aaron, I wrote this for you. And they all came. We shot it, like I said, in 2 weekends. A lot of my crew were students from the university. Now, the one big difference from people that is the sheriff, Woody, really old friend of mine named Tom Cherry. He's also in Scarecrow County. And I always had said he's a local theater person. He's done a ton of plays, acting. He has a radio show at a local community center. Actually, the community center in the movie where they play the Dungeons and Dragons game, that's a community center that he puts on plays and radio shows. And I always had said if I made a movie, I'd put Tom in it because he's just a great friend. I think he's a great actor. So I wrote that. I wrote Woody really for him. But the rest of the group, I didn't really know where they were going to come from. And so the D&D group, for lack of a better word, they're really Tom Cherry's acting troupe that have been in plays with him and his radio show. And so they were very comfortable in that space because that is their performance space. I rented that for a day. I think we shot all of that for them in a day. And so some of those folks I met the day that I got to the set. And we shot that out in one day, all of the stuff with the D&D group. And so anyway, that was, I thought I knew what it was going to be like because I'd worked in television and done live television, live sports directing, all of that. But it was like an avalanche coming down a mountain. I really didn't know what I was getting into.
Well, I will say one thing about, and I want to give a shout out to Henrik while we're talking about him just a little bit, is we love Henrik. He's always very supportive of creative folks. So, with his weekly spooky podcast, he's featured some of my stories on there, and he's always willing to give advice. Elena and I have asked him advice when we started this podcast, and he got on a Zoom meeting with us for like an hour to kind of tell us what to do, because we're like you. We don't know what we're doing. We're just, hey, we're going to start a podcast. So Henrik said, well, these are the things you really need to do. And he kind of broke it down for us. So Henrik, we love you, man. Just wanted to put that out there while we're talking about you.
Well, I'll tell you then a funny story about how I actually met Henrik to tell you what a charismatic person he is. So like there was a horror convention in Dayton, Ohio, where he lives, called Scary Camp. And when I was really trying to break in to the industry, I went to a lot of conventions trying to meet people. So this is like the early 2000s. And I went to Scary Camp because it's an hour and a half probably from where I live. So I drove over there. I met a ton of people that day from that era of the B-movie world. There were a lot of people there. Well, and there was this high school kid at a booth. And I started talking to he was there with another high schooler, and I stood and talked to these kids forever, just really interesting kids. And the guy said, hey, I'm screening a movie tonight. I made a movie called Slumber Party Murder Mania or something like that. And would you stay and watch it? And remember, he's a kid. I'm a grown man, right? I'm a grown adult man. And he convinced me to stay and watch this is Henrik, and watch his movie at 7:00. He was just this energetic, excited person, and I ended up staying late to go watch his, VHS movie that he made, and they screened there. And he was just an interesting. You could see he was going somewhere with his life, and so I kind of kept that in the back of my mind. And so he's a high school kid, and I'm 20 years older than Henrik, so I'm in my 30s, And so fast forward a couple years, and I was judging a high school film festival in Richmond, Indiana. That was at the art museum there. It's for high school kids. And I was one of the judges, and we have a guest speaker every year. We still do it there. I'm still a judge in it. It's been around for quite a few years. And I said, I met this high school kid a couple years ago, and he was just a really charismatic young dude. He's in Dayton. He might come over and talk to, and give the keynote, So I reached out on Facebook, I think, and I was like, hey, I don't know if you remember me, blah, blah, blah. Would you come over, to our film festival and talk to some high school kids? Yeah. And he came with his mom, which is funny because we've never figured out. He can't remember, and I don't remember why he came with his mom. But him and his mom came over to Richmond, and he spoke, did a great job. And he and I were just talking afterwards. I mean, I hadn't seen him in quite a few years. And he was like, hey, do you ever want to work together on something? Let me know. I was like, no, I'm retired. At that time, I've walked away from B movies twice, almost 3 times for various reasons. And at that time, I'm being funny, but it was kind of serious. My friend Ivan Rogers, who was a filmmaker I'd worked with, had passed away, and John Polonia had passed away, kind of close together. And then I got ripped off. I didn't get paid for a project I wrote. My name didn't appear on 2 movies that I wrote that came out without my name on them. And I thought I deserved credit. So I just got into a couple bad situations. Some of my friends had passed away, and I just wasn't interested anymore. So Henrik said, well, if you ever want to do anything, let me know. I said, I'm not really up for anything anymore. And he still sent me a link to Babysitter Massacre, which I know you guys are familiar with.
Oh, yeah.
And I watched it, and I was like, there's something going on. There was just this anarchic energy and fun. I was like, there's really something to this. And Henrik called me. He kind of disputes this. He says that I reached out to him, but there's no way I did, because I was out of the industry. He called me. He likes to say that I called him, but he called me, and he said, I have this movie I'm working on. What is it? Okay, it's Haunted House on Sorority Row. I was like, great title. The only superfluous word is on, right? It has a haunted house in Sorority Row. You know what you're getting. There it is. So that brought me back from exile, because I was like, oh, I would love to do that, because I watched Babysitter Massacre. I thought it was really good. And I was like, oh, I'd love to do this. So I'm sitting at home with my wife and daughter, who I think was in college at the time, maybe high school. And we're sitting around, I'm telling him about, I met this guy. I'm going to work on this movie called Haunted House on Sorority Row. My daughter was like, well, you're not going to make one of those movies with pillow fights and showers and stuff, are you, Dad? And I was like, oh, no, which of course is what I exactly was going to do. So then I was like, no, of course not. I would never do that. And so I wrote a much more progressive movie than I intended to when I started. I decided I couldn't let my daughter down. And so I wrote a more, and it's funny because when Wired magazine reviews that movie, they note that it's got a very feminist, progressive slant to it compared to a lot of those movies. So I was happy that they noticed that. So I did that movie with Henrik. It's still one of the favorite movies that was made from one of my scripts. And at the very end of the movie, when all the people go into the haunted house at the end, I'm an extra there. That day I went to the set, and so I'm at the very, very end of the movie going into the haunted house at the end when it becomes an attraction. But it's funny because I know when basically the notes Henrik gave me was like, okay, I want people with problems, and somebody needs to be kind of like this kind of character, and I was like, okay, people with problems. I'm just typing, listening to John Denver, drinking chocolate milk, and I'm like, well, what are problems?
John Denver.
I did, and I was like,
That's the
just chilling
second
out,
time his name
like,
has been brought up on this
Yes, it
podcast.
there you
has.
go.
It has.
You're
But
kind of an
go
old
ahead.
soul then, Elena, is what I'm hearing, is what I'm hearing. You're kind of an old
Oh
soul.
yeah. My
Okay, so
brothers
you're
were
fine.
12 years older than me as well, so that kind of also had to play in that. But
Okay, fair
my
enough.
mom was, we had all kinds of stuff going on in the house, all kinds of stuff. So
like, I was like, okay, what are problems? Okay, child abuse is a problem, cutting's a problem, all these different things. Just think, okay, what are problems? And I'm writing all this. I didn't really realize like how dark it was until I went to the movie. Like, people are like, man, the guy who wrote, I'm in the bathroom at the theater when it was screened. Nobody knows who I am, and I'm just standing there. The guys are, man, this dude wrote this, had some problems, man. Like, no, honestly, he said put problems in it. These aren't my problems, So at around that very time, Mark Polonia reached out to me, and again, I was like, no, I'm retired. And he was like, well, I'm going to do this rubber monster movie, like 50s style, like, Beast from Haunted Cave. I want it to be a throwback style movie. I was like, okay, I kind of like that. So then I wrote Jurassic Prey, which I think is great, but a lot of people, I don't think, were in on the joke. Like, I wrote it to be funny, but I think people think it's serious. And so everybody thinks it sucks, but I think it's a great script. I'm very proud of it. So those two movies together kind of brought me back into the industry, and I've just been roaring ever since. And then I made my two movies. So the day that we recorded, Henrik and I recorded the commentary track for Girl in the Crawl Space. That day, we we were going out to walk his dogs. They're a cold day, and so we shot Crawl Space in March of 18, and it screened at a film festival in October of 18, and then we sold it basically over Christmas to the distributor, and we did all of the extras and the commentary, all the deliverables we did in January. So that's now January of 19, and Henrik and I are walking his dogs, and the distributor's like, okay, what else you guys got? Well, I had nothing. I wanted to make one movie. I had done nothing else. I wasn't ready for anything else. But they were like, hey, what else you guys got? I mean, that's what you hear, right? But I'm even guilty of that. If I'm on with some other movie people, hey, what are you working on? What's next? No, that's always what people say. What's next? Well, I wasn't prepared to say what was next. So Henrik and I are walking around, walking the dogs on this cold day. And he says, hey, when we were out at my house, if you've seen Girl in the Crawl Space, Elena, just recently, I mean, it's very rural Indiana, spare landscape. I really tried to lean into what Henrik calls Hoosier exploitation, this idea of India. I'm not hiding that it's in the Midwest. A lot of times people shoot these movies and they try to pretend they're not shot in regional, but I love regional films. So I really leaned into that Indiana culture and all of that. He goes, when we were out at your house, because, Henrik lives in a city and I live on 5 acres, as you can see in the movie Crawl Space. And he goes, it really reminded me of that movie, Dark Night of the Scarecrow. You guys know what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
It was a TV movie from like the 70s, maybe 80s.
Yeah, I remember it.
Yeah, it was a TV movie. And we were like, oh, yeah. And I was like, if I was to remake Dark Knight of the Scarecrow today, so what the plot of it, Lane, is like a disabled person who is picked on and basically tormented. And then I think he gets killed. I don't exactly remember. He becomes a scarecrow and gets revenge on the people of the town. But there's a little girl, kind of a Frankenstein thing, a little girl that understands him.
Creepy little kid, I'm in.
Yeah. So I said, if I would do it today, I wouldn't do it about a mentally disabled person being tormented. I do about a gay kid being tormented, because that's more of a, that's definitely a Midwestern thing, this idea of, and, I had said to Henrik, when I was a kid in the 70s, there was no such thing, as gay people. There was nobody out, even when I went to high school in the 80s, no one was out. Now, some of my friends that I went to high school with are now out or trans, but they were not then. And, when my kids went to school, late 90s, early 2000s, there were kids that were out. It was not as uncommon. And now my daughter's a high school teacher, and she's the advisor for the Gay Alliance, the Gay Pride Alliance, or Gay Straight Alliance, I think maybe is what it's called,
Good for
at the high
her.
school. So that's how it has evolved from like the late 70s when I was a kid to like 2020s when my daughter's a teacher. And, it's kind of gone from no one says anything doesn't exist to, when my kids they're in their 30s now, but when they were kids, there were kids that were out and were accepted at varying degrees. And now the school sponsors a club, LGBTQS plus club. And, that would never have existed. So, I was kind of having this conversation about that. And that all of a sudden, Henrik's like, well, why don't we make that movie? I was like, okay, well, what about this? And then he's like, what about that? And then this happens. And then this person. And that day in January of 19, I went home and, I just caught the fire. I started writing. And we shot it in March of 19. And then in October of 19, it played at a dusk to dawn movie thing in Iowa City, and Henrik and I went out and watched it. So we started talking about it in January, shot it in March. It was done in October at a film festival. And I remember Henrik saying, there's some really crazy ideas in this. And I was like, do you remember that day we walked around with the dog? You told me the whole plot of it. I just wrote it down. Like he was, oh yeah. Like he forgot. I'm being serious. He forgot that he basically told me the entire plot of the movie. And I just went home and just wrote it down in like this
took
white
mental
hot
notes
frenzy.
and put it down. Yeah.
Yeah. And so we just walked so the day that we did the deliverables, finished, I say Henrik did the deliverables on Crawl Space. I went home and started writing Scarecrow County, and we shot it. That would be about 10 weeks later. And then in October it was done. And what was funny, now to circle back to your original commentary about John and Joni, what was funny about Crawl Space especially was, so they both came out in 20. They were shot a year apart. But when I did Crawl Space, I had said to Henrik, I really wrote this for John and Joni, but they just played brother and sister in Ouija Room, which was shot directly before I started Crawl Space, like right before. And he was like, no one's going to make that connection. It turns out Ouija Room and Crawl Space came out the same day. They came out the exact same day in February of 20. So in some ways, I think it helped us.
This ain't Alabama. Sorry.
So like, I think it helped us both because it just really helped hype. What was funny, it's like I'm not saying that Crawl Space coming out like ushered in the apocalypse, but kind of, because this now foreshadowing, right? It's February of 2020, right? So what's getting ready to happen? So I'm in Chicago at a conference, and I'm driving home from Chicago to Indiana on a Monday. It's like a 5 or 6 hour drive. And I know that the movie is dropping at Family Video the next day. Movies come out on Tuesday. So I look on a map of all the Family Video locations between the hotel in Chicago, my house in Moreland, Indiana, over here like this. And so I decide I'm going to stop and I'm going to stop in these Family Videos in Indiana, and I'm going to say, hey, I'm John Dalton. My movie Girl in the Crawl Space that was shot here in Indiana comes out tomorrow. Hope you guys carry it. And it was just a really cool experience. I probably stopped at 6 or 8 Family Videos on that drive. And by and large, the people were really excited. And some of them already had, it wasn't out yet, but they had it under the counter in a box. So I took pictures with people, and I mean, it was really a cool experience. And then coronavirus started. So, but like, that was like such a cool experience to get to do that. But I kind of, speaking of foreshadowing, I kind of knew, because some of the places I stopped, they were like, well, we're getting ready to close. I mean, a couple of the Family Videos were like, hey, we're getting ready to close. So I kind of had a bad feeling that the end of Family Video was coming. Yeah. But that was like the very last thing I did before coronavirus hit. And then Scarecrow County came out in October of 20. So Crawl Space came out in February of 20, and then in October, a Scarecrow came out. So they actually both came out in 20. So that was besides the worldwide epidemic, it was a good year for me.
Right.
So
then we were in the crawl space, if you will.
yes, exactly. I sat in this very seat. I was sent, this is not my real life. I was sent home from work for 3 weeks and stayed home for 17 months, sitting right here. We were supposed to go home and work from home for 3 weeks, and I was home for 17 months. So that's how that went. But,
Yeah, my wife did almost the exact same thing. I won't say who her employer is, but she used to travel a lot for the company she works for. And as soon as the pandemic hit, she's basically been in her home office ever since. So the travel's starting to pick back up just a tiny bit, but it's mostly home shore stuff. But we're grateful she can do that. Clients adapted and found out there's lots of things they can do remotely. So
yeah, we have found that
I
out.
work healthcare, so I did not have that.
Oh my!
Did not have that time.
That's a truly honorable job for sure.
I'm on the orthopedic side of it, so I wasn't in like the throes of it, but it was a lot. We went through about 5 policy changes a day. I wanted to rip my hair out every day.
I can imagine.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
People are still not nice yet, so I don't know. I'm waiting on that to change. I don't know when that's going to come back, but I think people forgot how to be humans.
For sure.
In general.
I think my problem right now is trying to figure out like how to start back up on a movie because I shot over spring break from my school in 18. I shot Crawl Space. Over spring break of 19, I shot Scarecrow. So spring break of 20, March of 20, I was getting ready to shoot a third feature. Same with Henrik and a group of people. And the night, so this was like on a Wednesday maybe. We were told that Friday was going to be our last day at the office and we were going home for 3 weeks. Well, I was already off the next week because had already been to the store. I was making the sandwiches for the weekend crew. This is like
ready
Thursday.
to go. Yeah.
I was ready to go. And I had actually Thursday night, I went to the location and scouted and took a couple pictures for Henrik and some things. We were shooting in a big house and not at my house this time, but at a big house. And so I was ready to go. But that Friday, I just started thinking, I think we can, because we were going to shoot 2 weekends again. And I thought, I bet we can get this weekend in, but next weekend we might be in trouble. And then I'd have half a movie instead of no movie. And half a movie is worse than no movie. So I canceled at the very last minute. And I think people were relieved because the very next week, because a lot of my crew and cast were coming from Ohio. Well, the very next week, basically the border between Indiana and Ohio was basically closed.
Yeah.
Within basically, not literally, but basically.
Yeah, but that's around the time the country basically went on lockdown.
Yeah. About a week later. So if I had shot that first weekend and hosted a super spreader event, obviously, which I didn't even know what a super spreader was at the time. The last day we were in the office, like, okay, there's a pandemic, so we're going to go home for 3 weeks until it dies down. Okay, so we all ordered in lunch and sat in the conference room and ate lunch together. But we didn't know, we didn't know what a super spreader was. So anyway, and it's good I didn't start that movie because one of the actresses has had a baby since then. At least 1 or 2 people have moved away. Away. And I don't know, I haven't been back to this person's house. Maybe somebody spilled coffee on the couch and they have a brand new couch. And one scene there's a red couch and one scene there's a blue. People gain weight during coronavirus. There's all these things. So it's just as well I didn't make the movie. But now it's so difficult to figure out how I'm going to get started again.
It's also hard because I found it was very disheartening to see that a lot of the people that I was very much just I looked up to really in the art world and things like that. They were getting out of the art industry altogether, or the makeup artist industry, and just because of the pandemic, of how much it hurt their pocket and their livelihood, and they wanted to do more than just be, but then they gave up on it. So you have a lot of people who just gave up on their dream and thought now, why get back into it? I'm making money now. It's a pipe dream. And that makes me sad, because the I don't know how to word what I'm trying to say. It's just things that have been taken away from the pandemic, much more than the loss of family members, the loss of hope, and now you're losing out on your dreams. And it's hard for people like us, like you, who want to restart with your movies again, or finding people who want to keep doing movies because of it, and that.
Well, I worked on a film with Henrik on Secret Lockdown during coronavirus, and he probably has told you both, I'm sure at least you, Charles, that it was really start and stop, really struggled getting it done. I wrote several other movies so I was able to sit here and write. Noah's Shark that has come out, I wrote. I forget, Shark Encounters, I think I did. I forget. I did a couple during coronavirus. But anyway, so writing, that hasn't been a problem, but I know on the production side, it's been difficult. So definitely Henrik had some starts and stops with the one we worked on together, the one that I wrote for him. But it's very close to being done now, but it was, and some of it was coronavirus related things that happened, and some of it was just the complexity of our world. And if Tom Cruise can't finish Mission Impossible, I don't really feel super bad about not being able to finish my movie or start a new movie. But I'm still writing for folks. I'm actually working on something with Henrik right now. I've got something right after that lined up with a good friend that I wish lived closer, named Joe Sherlock, who's a B-movie guy. It's been around forever. He's out in Oregon. Kind of like Mark Polonia. If we didn't live a couple thousand miles apart, we'd be really, really dangerous. But Joe is a guy, my age, who's been in the industry probably the same, 90s time period. Makes his own movies. I did one for him called Things 666 that came out, and turned out good, just came out. And I'm writing a segment for a new anthology he's working on. He's a real talented dude. And, you get everybody, I called in every single favor I had in the world to make Crawl Space. And then we all had enough fun. We just made another movie together. But so I try to be aware of people that have, Joe made the mask for me in Scarecrow County. And he did some, Elena, at the end, there's all those psychic voices and some of the phone voices and stuff. He did all that for me, most of it. Jeff Kirkendall, who works with Mark Polonia, did a couple for me as well. So, then he called me and said, I'm doing 2 Things movies back to back, 5 and 6. And I don't have time to write both of them. Well, I'll write one for you, because I owed him a favor because he bailed me out on Scarecrow County. And, when I did Crawl Space, a guy named Tim Schrum made the mask for me in that. And another director I like named Andrew Scheer recorded a voice for me. And Jeff Kirkendall did a little something for me. And obviously Henrik's contribution, and on. So I try to be cognizant of, around that time, Henrik was making that Boggy Creek TV show. And I don't know if you've seen that, but
I've seen it. I love it.
Yeah. So I actually worked on that. I'm uncredited, but like the last day of production, like the dead last day of production, Henrik had called me and said, we are just really shorthanded. We need to get this done. I said, I'll come over and PA for the day. So actually, ironically, the Scarecrow episode I was there for, which has a Joe Kidd and Ia Windermere, who are both in my movies, are the couple in that. Or I think Joe's the sheriff and Ia plays a part in it. And so I went over. I didn't get a credit on it. I'm not a PA credit or anything, but I went over and worked on it. I said, yeah, you need help? I'll come over and help for a day. And we did we started in the morning and we finished at 1 or 2 the next morning.
Yeah, Joni was telling us about the challenges of that show with her car trouble. She had to get rides to work every day, just about.
Yeah, she did. She did talk about that. When we made, when I did the 2 movies, I kind of flipped I wanted Aaron and Joni and John all to be in my next movie too, but all these different commitments, especially Joni had a lot of commitments at the time. So I ended up driving to Dayton, and she had a little part in my second movie that was at her place. And John very courteously drove over from Dayton and spent a day with me at that library that's in the movie. That's a real library. That's a really common question that I get asked is that a real library? And that's a library that my wife volunteers at. And we rented that on a day they were closed and spent a day shooting in there. So yeah, my second movie, Scarecrow County, I tried to make a lot more bigger, a lot more ambitious, a lot more actors, a lot more locations. My first movie was 3 people in my house, but I did all of this. I just didn't add money or time. And so I think I probably learned more on my second movie because I tried to do more things. We had fog machines and gelled lights and costumes and stuff we just didn't do. I didn't try.
You had fun stuff. You had all kinds of fun stuff.
So I think I actually learned more making the second movie, and definitely made more mistakes, I think, on the second film. But I really made that one more for Henrik because in a way, because like my crawl space movie, and maybe I don't know, Lainey, you might understand. Like I love like 70s auteur films. That's my genre. Like my touch points are all 60s and 70s movies.
Oh, you're talking to the right girl with that stuff. She
that's one
messages
of
me
my
all the time.
main reasons I have Shudder. All of the 70s horror is just we binge so much during COVID
What
too.
was the Kojak movie? Not Kojak. Telly Savalas. What you said? You gotta watch
Lisa
it.
and the Devil.
Yeah, Lisa and the Devil.
That's a fantastic movie.
Yes, and
there
I
was
love
another
Italian
one we
giallo
watched.
Movies.
Yeah.
So like Henrik was like, I said, I want long takes. I want master shots. I want super tight. He had these old lenses. He goes, I'm going to use these old lenses, like old time lenses.
Right.
I'm going to make it look just like a 70s movie, and he just went with whatever I said, let's let this play out. Let's have long take. I tried to make a 70s style movie, which it was my style. So when I made the next movie, I was like, Henrik, I'm going to make a movie based on your touch points, because his touch points are all like 80s and 90s. So okay, we'll have fog machines, blue gels, we'll have a scarecrow, we'll have Dutch angles. I tried to make a more stylish looking 90s movie instead of a 70s slow burn. Like my first movie is really almost more of a thriller. It's just a slow burn. Which I intended, and people say, "Oh, your movie's really slow," but that's what I wanted it to be. Where I tried to make my second movie more exciting, but I realized when I got done, it's still very talky and cerebral, But I was trying to make a movie like what Henrik's touch points are. Like his touch points are 80s and 90s, and if you watch Haunted House on Story Row, I think you see those things melded.
Oh yeah.
Like I wrote a very cerebral 70s movie, but it has that 90s gloss over it. It has all the gels and all that shine of the 90s, but it's really it's all a psychological movie. And so I think that was the first melding of like his and mine styles.
Your styles, yeah.
I've written 5 or 6 movies for him now that he directed. And then I've written 2 for myself that I directed that he DP'd and produced for me. So, I mean, our temperaments are starting to meld together. He's watching more of my style of movies, and I watch, I got him. He watches Italian movies now, and I haven't been able to get him into Russian science fiction films quite yet. Soviet science fiction like Stalker and Solaris and stuff like that. But he won't watch that. But I am getting him into more of some of that.
Yeah.
But it's just what you grew up with, and honestly, in the 80s and 90s, I was married with kids. I wasn't going to see the new Friday the 13th movie. So to be honest, I missed all of that. I missed all of that stuff because my kids were born in the 80s and I was a dad. And so I wasn't going all the Friday the 13th, all the Freddy movies, all the Halloween movies. I didn't see any of that stuff.
Well, I graduated high school in '87, so I got all of that stuff.
See, I graduated in '84. So
Okay.
I'm a little bit ahead of you, but we're kind of in the same. But except for when you were still going to movies, I was married and with kids, and so I wasn't doing. I missed a lot of that. So my genre influences are all before that, like 70s and 60s.
I'll tell you, I drove my dad nuts when Friday the 13th, the final chapter came out. That was part 4. I'm sitting in my grandmother's house, and I call him on the phone. I said, "Dad, you got to take me see this." He didn't give a shit about Friday the 13th movies. "You got to take me see this movie. It's the last one. They're never going to make another one." Yeah. How many movies later?
Like 175. He will never die.
He will never die. But they said final chapter. They had me hook, line, and sinker when I was a kid. This is the last one they're ever going to make. Dad, you got to take me. I got to go to the theater and see. Okay. So he's like snoring in the theater while I'm sitting there just glued to the screen. And I'm thinking, oh, this is the last one until the next one. But anyway.
I think like what tipped me over was seeing Dawn of the Dead on a revival in the movie theater. I mean, I didn't watch it in 70, whatever, when it came out. I was too young, but it came back around when I was in high school.
Right.
And I remember going to see it. Actually, Night of the Living Dead was played at my high school, like as a fundraiser, which I think every parent today would throw a fit if they showed Night of the Living Dead at school, but they had it at school, like at the school auditorium. And I remember seeing that, but I think Dawn of the Dead influenced me more because it was like, it was done cheaply and you didn't really know who was going to survive. Like John Wayne wasn't going to show up at the end and save everybody, and when I saw a movie like that, a B movie, like anything was possible. And I think that's the first time that ever really occurred to me, dawned on me, so to speak. And I think the next time was not very much later when I saw the original Evil Dead on VHS. I got it from a video store. And I remember watching that and thinking, anything goes, in this kind of world. And I think those are probably the things that tipped me over more as an older person. And like when I was a kid, I was watching all the Samson Italian movies and Japanese rubber monster movies. And, we had a late night movie host from Indianapolis called Sammy Terry. And, I stayed up all night watching him or as late as I could stay up. And so, those were Son of Svengoolie wasn't on MeTV back then. He was on a channel out of Chicago that we got. And so I could see him back in those days.
We had something very similar. It came on every Saturday night at like midnight. It was called Shock Theater. And it was Count Justice. He was dressed up like a vampire. He had the cloak and everything. And he had this big laugh and he would show, old horror movies, monster movies, werewolf, Dracula, all the old black and white stuff. So that was cool.
My grandpa and he lived in South Carolina, and he used to watch movies with me all the time, like the 70s horror and stuff. Meanwhile, my mom would watch Dark Shadows with me, and we'd watch all the old school Universal monster movies, Abbott and Costello movies, all of those. But he was a main one. Like I would go there I used to beg them to take me for Halloween, and my parents' anniversary was around that time too. I used to get so excited. I was like, "We're gonna stay up all night. We're gonna stay up all night and watch scary movies." And I think one of my favorites was the Christopher Lee's version of the Dracula movie. That was one of my favorites. We watched all of those. I was infatuated with that. And then we watched Congo. That was the one with the gorilla or the ape or something that was ripping people's faces off. And my mom was like, "What the hell did you show her?" And I'm just like spouting all this knowledge out. It was so funny.
So, Lena, are you a fan of Rocky Horror? Do I see that hanging back there?
Oh my God, is she?
Yes,
do you still get?
My mom started watching that with me. Do
they still have midnight movies that you can go to and see it?
Oh yeah, I want to be a shadowcaster so bad. I'm thinking about reaching out and trying to do that for the Lips on Dixie here in Georgia. Because I really want to do that because I cosplay as Magenta a lot.
So my brush with Rocky Horror is that Richard O'Brien's son, Linus O'Brien, used to work for me, and I got to. Linus went to the college that I worked at, and Linus was pretty circumspect about who his dad was and everything, and I was cool about it or whatever. But when Linus graduated, I was his boss at a production unit. He said, "Would you go to the airport and pick up my dad and bring him to graduation?" Because he didn't have a car, I don't think, or anything. Or Linus didn't have a car. So I went and picked up his dad, and I remember going into the airport. This is before 9/11, so you could just walk right up to the terminal. And he was wearing like a cowboy hat, like a purple Western style shirt, like leopard skin pants, like cowboy boots. I don't know if he thought that's how we were going to dress in Indiana when he got there, but I was like, I recognize that dude from a long way off. And that was one of my most memorable.
That would have been like the
days.
biggest dreams come true. That's us and what we cosplay as Magenta and Riff.
Okay, yeah, I can see that. So Linus is actually in shock treatment in the sequel, which people don't see very much, or you don't hear much about it. He actually is a little kid.
I liked it, but it's not. There's no Tim Curry, so I'm sorry, I'm out.
Anyway, when I was a high school kid, that was a big thing to go to the midnight movies and watch.
Oh yeah,
watch Rocky Horror, and it would be Rocky Horror. The Wall was always playing at midnight movies. I've told people several times, one of the funniest things that happened to me is my brother and I went to the midnight movies to see Excalibur. I don't know if you guys remember that movie.
I've seen it.
Great movie.
But we went to the wrong theater.
There are two versions. But anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, so with Nigel Hawthorne, I think, is Merlin and all that. It comes out, I think, early 80s. So we go to the midnight movies to see it, where like the movie starts, like, man, this doesn't look like Excalibur, man. And we had actually gone into the theater showing Desperately Seeking Susan, which wasn't exactly the same movie as Excalibur. But we actually stayed and watched Desperately Seeking Susan, like, okay, this is pretty good. This is an all right movie. And then we went back another night and watched Excalibur. But imagine the shock when you are a young dude thinking you're going to go see Excalibur, and then there's Madonna singing, whatever she was singing in that on the screen. We're like, wait a minute, where's Liam Neeson at, man? Where's Patrick Stewart? What's going on?
Well, when the movie Interview with the Vampire came out, I forgot what year that came out. Was it early 90s, late 80s? I can't remember.
I think early 90s.
But my brother and I, we went to the Regency Exchange Theater here locally, and we bought tickets to see something else. It wasn't that. And we got up to the ticket counter, or where the guy was tearing tickets, and he was like, "You guys here to see?" He said, "Are you guys here for Interview with the Vampire?" My brother looked at him with a straight face because he didn't know what he was talking about. He said, "No, man, we're not here for an interview. We're here to see a movie." I was like, "Nah, man, he's talking about a movie." Oh.
That's funny.
I think going back to Rocky Horror with your daughter teaching the classes for the, having that place for the LGBTQIA++ community. I think I watched Rocky Horror so young. Like, obviously it was inappropriate for me to watch it at the age I watched it at, but I think that's why I was always so open towards literally nothing ever surprised me as a kid. Like, I just understood it. I was like, oh, cool. Drag queens. Awesome. They're pretty. They're gorgeous. I love them. Same with trans people. And I remember the first time one of my actual friends came out to me, right before we went, and it was kind of like that 13, 14 age. And they were very kind of scared what I would say. And I was like, oh, okay, cool. What do you want for dinner? Like, cool. No problem. Like, I don't care. But I think that opened the door for a lot of people and is still helping people get more integrated with themselves and, explore and be happy about it, and I think that movie is a stepping stone for everybody. And most people are like, it's a terrible film. No, it's fantastic. It's one of the best films ever made, and everybody can argue with me on that. I don't care. But I think it's just it's made families for people, who have lost that sense of community with their own people, because they came out. So that movie's done a lot of good things for a lot of people.
Well, when I was doing Scarecrow County, I mean, that was, I think it's hard sometimes to signal that you're an ally, either to people of color or to people in that LGBTQ community. If you look like an undercover policeman, like I do, Like, right. Right. Like, I mean, I'm a middle-aged white guy. I mean, me and Mike Pence can get on a magic carpet and fly all around, do whatever we want in the world, right? No one can stop us, right? I mean, I am the most privileged person in the world.
Mhm.
There's no doubt. And so how do you signal to people that you're an ally, without pandering or appearing, when I worked at Ball State University, I was a advisor for a black student group of TCOM students, and I learned a lot being involved with that group of students.
Right.
When we had at the college I work at now, they had Alliance Week is what they call it, and they had a panel called Straight Talk where they wanted straight people to come and be on a panel and talk about all these different experiences. I was the straight person that they invited. But I think it's because I try to signal that I'm an ally, and I've even done some of that training you can do academically. As a professional, I've done some training like that just so I could try to signal to people. But it is difficult, I think, to try to do that and to articulate that when you're in a place of a lot of privilege. And so when I wrote Scarecrow County, I was trying to be really mindful of that and try to say, well, this is, because there are all these older guys, and everybody was really closeted and it wasn't talked about. And they, they basically bash a kid, and then that eventually comes around to torment them. And I remember the guy who plays the Scarecrow in it is a young guy. He was the mascot at our college, so I knew he could be in a mask and not see out of. And, he could be very physical, which he was in the movie. He has some really neat things that he does. But at one point, he didn't read the script or anything, I don't think. He just, hey, will you come play the Scarecrow? And, yeah, at one point he said, am I a gay Scarecrow? And I was like, yeah, you are. And he's like, oh, okay, that's,
solid, cool.
He was like, wait a minute. Because he started kind of putting together the movie. And and I remember Chelsea Kern, who plays the lead, she plays the librarian character. What was interesting is at that very time we were shooting that movie, she was in a play called Fun Home. She was a theater major in college at the time. She was in a play called Fun Home at her college in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And Fun Home is based on a graphic novel. I don't know if you guys are familiar with it. I think the woman's name is Alison Bechtel that did the comic, but it's about, she lived in a funeral home that they called the Fun Home, and her father was a funeral director, but he was a closeted gay person. And there's a play based on it now. I mean, the comic book is serious. There's some funny things in it, but it's basically about her father being closeted and everything. And she was in that play in Fort Wayne while we were making Scarecrow County. So she and I sat and talked quite a bit about, she was like, where exactly did you get this idea? And why did you want to do this? And she was playing a lesbian character in Fun Home. I think she was. And so, we had some of those conversations when we were on the set, and, we just were able to kind of articulate some of those thoughts. And, this was talking to younger, both she and Rachel, who played her sister in the movie, both quite a bit younger than me. And their father, Tom in the movie, my friend Tom, he and I are the same age. And then, Chelsea and Rachel played, his daughter, and they're young enough to be my daughters. So we had some of those conversations, and it was interesting, to do that and to try to, I think sometimes it's difficult, even in my job now in marketing for a college, you want to make sure you're inclusive. And sometimes you have to go out and say, hey, I need some people of color to come to this photo shoot. Well, you just want me in it because I'm Black or Hispanic. Well, in a way, yes, but also so we can signal to people that you're welcome. And that's something that I feel like in my movies coming up, I need to be more mindful of, is like, I have to not always cast, well, right. I mean, if I can be more, if I can get out there more. I mean, to be honest, my first movies I cast using friends and stuff because I was trying to make a movie for no money and calling in favors. But I'm hoping as I progress and can do real casting that I can cast more widely. And I tried to a little bit in Scarecrow County because I did introduce some new people. And one of them was an actress named Sarah Calenda that I had met Actually, I'd seen her at a film festival in a couple films, and so I reached out to her, and that's how I found Chelsea Kern too. I saw her at a film festival, but I'm trying to be more mindful of that in upcoming movies. I wasn't trying to stay away from that in my first movies. I was just using all people that I knew.
Right. And I think Elena can actually appreciate that. I've never worked on a film, maybe one day. Kind of thrown hints out there to Henrik about maybe doing something with Horror 421, make an anthology film, which maybe you could screenwrite. But anyway,
there you go.
Digress.
The project we're ready.
But Elena can probably.
I'm not joking. We could knock that baby right out. Don't worry about it.
I'm not either. But I gotta line my projects up. I'm working on a novel right now that I really need to get out this year. But anyway, the point was Elena can really back you up on that because she's worked on a couple of lower budget films, and they use who they can use, who's available, and I'll let you speak to that, Elena. I thought you might want to chime in on that.
I have met so many cool people doing it. And plus being on the B side of things, all of the actors are a lot more energetic, enthused. They're ready to be in the movie, because they're just kind of getting into the industry themselves. So their performances are they either want it to be like this, they're just so enthusiastic, and it's fun to be around to see because I was blessed enough, we had a very wide range of cast members, of all different genders and everything like that. And it was cool to see everybody come together in the room, and kind of how we warmed up, we all just kind of went around the room, talked about ourselves, but we all got to watch horror movies together. But it's fun being around a different cast of people with everybody from different backgrounds and different upbringings and things like that. I think it brings a lot more to the table as well, and opens your eyes to a lot of other people's experiences, that we as other people who have had that privilege, didn't have. So, I mean, it's good to hear other people and to know that you can be their ally for them and vice versa. So it's been a really fun ride with that.
I'm going to say that with a caveat because I know Henrik's going to watch this and reach out to me and say, I'm Portuguese, right? And he always says, well, my name's Henrik Couto. I said, man, you could be from Quebec. That doesn't mean anything.
Elena pronounced his name correctly.
Henrik. You could be from anywhere, man. What are you talking about? Yeah, he always.
I mean, come on, man.
Yeah, so I forget that a lot of times. He said, "Your producer's Portuguese. What are you talking about? You need more." But I just don't think. I don't think about that. I'm more in front of the camera. Is I think where I try to, when I made my movies, I tried to use. I had some women PAs, which I tried to be mindful of that. But I think you hit on something that I was just needling somebody on Twitter about this actually, because I enjoy nothing more than to get on Twitter and look for movies that I've worked on and what people are saying and answer and talk to them and needle them and goof on them. I love nothing more than to do that. And sometimes people take it to heart because they don't think that it doesn't occur to them that we're real people, that we live somewhere. And there's a guy just today, maybe yesterday, that was like, oh man, I didn't think anybody from this movie would see this. And I'm sorry about what I said. No, it's just, what I took the guy to task about was this idea that they're just cashing in. Brother, I'd like to see some of that cash. We never have cashed in. I can tell you that. Right. We wouldn't be making ham sandwiches, for the crew if we were cashing in with peanut butter sandwiches. But it's a cash grab, Well, I wish it was. It's not. And then the thing that bothers me second most, it's lazy, it's cynical. They phoned it in, and I really take umbrage with people when they say that. And that's what I was telling this guy. Is I know that exists. There's cynicism in some of these films. I've never been around it because people, I have learned horror fans are very loyal and they will follow you to the end of the earth, and they will stay with you if you are honest and you are being serious about it. If you are coming from, I don't know how many people have said to me, well, if I can't make Schindler's List Part 2, I'll just bang out a couple B movies. you work just as hard on a B movie. It's not like it's easy, you know, and so that's, I think, where people get cynical. But, you know, if somebody does that, then horror fans can smell a rat. They will know if somebody comes from a place of cynicism. I mean, I'm talking about horror fans, just not people on the internet.
Right.
I'm talking about real horror fans that go to conventions, that have podcasts like this, that put out zines, horror fans, not just people that are watching movies on the internet. Those people can smell a rat. So if you're not sincere in your beliefs and love for the genre, they will know it. But if you are, they will follow you to the ends of the earth and be there for you, no matter what kind of movie you're making. And that's what bothers me, is this idea that it comes from cynicism. It doesn't. You know, it comes from cash grab. It can't. You know, and then this idea that it's
Money
lazy.
does not
It's
exist.
so hard. It's so hard to make a movie. Well, you know, Elena, if you've been on some sets, it's so hard to make it's so hard to make any movie. And I said this to a guy on YouTube that had made it. You know, no one makes a movie thinking, I mean, no actor or actress wants to be told they're bad or ugly, or that your movie is stupid or it's cheap. Nobody goes to the set saying, I hope somebody says I'm ugly, you know?
Yeah.
I mean, but that, you know, people straight up say, oh, your actresses were ugly. Your sets are, you know, are cheap. Your script was stupid, you know, on and on and on. It's like, you know, but people don't, no one's trying to make a bad movie. I mean, if they are, then again, that comes from cynicism, and those movies can be smelled out. But the movies I've worked on, people are, you know, I told the people that worked on my movies, many of which worked for free, not everybody, but many, you know, hey, you give me a couple weekends together and we'll make a movie, and, you know, maybe we'll get in the Walmart, maybe we'll get in the Family Video, maybe it'll be on Amazon, maybe it'll be at Dollar Tree, you know, but give me a couple weekends together and we'll do something. And, you know, and most people think if I do X, it'll lead to Y that leads to Z. They're not saying I'm going to stay here at X forever. I mean, you know, I shot Chelsea out in 2 days. I mean, Chelsea only had to come for 2 days for Scarecrow County. Rachel worked 3 days. You know, now when I did Crawl Space, Erin was there for 5 days, but she got to star in a movie, you know, that was written for her and she thought would maybe elevate her, you know, into something else. I mean, everything that we do at this level is trying to leverage into something else. I mean, if you understand that, you know, then I don't feel bad about saying, hey, I'll give you some gas money and a ham sandwich if you give me 2 weekends. Now, and you're something like you, Elena, like when I've had makeup people, I mean, I've paid for supplies and I've paid, you know, but a lot of times, you know, PAs and, you know, and I've paid actresses and actors, but, you know, for PAs and things like that, hey, if you'll come and give me some time, I can give you a chance, you know, to do X. And maybe someday someone will see that on IMDb and ask you to do Y. That's what nobody is saying, oh, let's bang this out and nobody cares. And you know, nobody gives a shit about it. That's not true. I mean, it is true, but it's never been true in anything I've worked on. And that's what bothers me the most is, but to be honest, I'm preaching to the choir because horror fans know that and they know the difference. And that's why, you know, the casual person can't understand Mark Polonia. You know, like he was just at Entertainment Weekly getting interviewed about Amityville in space. But the average person's like, what is this stupid trash? How is this getting made? Well, horror fans know how it's getting made. But the average person.
A lot of blood and tears, most of it your own.
but you know, they know that it's coming from love and not cynicism. And they know what they're getting. And the average person doesn't. And so they don't, or, you know, a movie like mine, you know, I was telling somebody that was raising money for a movie, you can raise all the money you want, make the most, but the very first thing that'll happen is you'll get a 1-star review on Amazon. That'll be the very first review will be 1 star. You may get some other ones later that are nice, but someone's going to drop a 1-star review on you the first day, and just be ready for that. Yeah. But those aren't the people that you're matter. Those aren't the people you're doing it for.
To that either.
But you will get criticism. No, and I tell you what, I've been on the other end where I've done movies that no one's ever seen, and that's worse. Yeah. It's worse to have a movie that no one's seen, that no one reviews, that no one knows that you did, than a movie that people say is the worst movie of all time. Right. And it sucks. That's much better because people want to see those movies. People don't want to see mediocre, average movies. But if you say this movie's really bad, people watch it. And that's why some of these have these crazy titles. Someone was asking me about that today. Noah's Shark. Some of the ones that Noah's Shark, Amityville Death House, Amityville Island. What else did Haunted House in Sorority Row. Alone in a Ghost House. That's why they have these titles, because people, Mark's movies are like, he's got Amityville in Space. I didn't help with that. Sharkula, didn't help with that. Sharkenstein. It's just,
Sharkenstein?
It's Sharkenstein. Yeah, you might like that.
I'll be watching that.
But he, he has an audience and he knows what they want and what they're in for a fun time. But the average person reading Entertainment Weekly doesn't get that.
Right.
But that's not what he's doing.
I work in a world full of normies, and I say that with love to the normies. Nothing against the normies, but they think they find out because where I work, I can't be who I am openly, outwardly, in any freaking way possible, because it's a very professional atmosphere. So when they find out I'm in horror, then they found out I worked at a haunted house, and then they found my TikToks, and then it got to everybody following me on Facebook. So like they buy me these weird trinket gifts, like with pumpkins on them and like, the generic stuff. And I'm like, you guys don't understand. Or they think just because I love Halloween and horror movies that I'm automatically going to have like a Chucky themed wedding and everybody's going to have themed out. No, no, we're not all like that. Like, I think my haunt owner even said that the people outwardly in the world who don't know what all it takes to get into the movie industry with horror, to do the makeup in horror, and to be an actor in it, don't realize that we live every single day as Halloween. Our whole life is Halloween. We are Halloween. Like that, we're not just about it. We are the Halloween. People come to us for different cool things like that. And like you said, the horror fans are very loyal. They will follow you to the ends of the earth. Whereas the other people who don't get it, they just don't. You either love horror or you just don't. And if you're in it for money, if you're in it for the pure, just because, hey, it's a small film, maybe it'll get me somewhere else. If you're going in it with intentions of ill-gotten gain, you might not go as far. And I've always felt that way.
I think that I was a lot like, for many, many years, until recent years, I was like you. Like somebody would say, hey, did you write this movie I heard of called Sex Machine? No, man, that's not me. I straight up told people I was not the same guy as that guy for a long time. And just in the last few years, actually, my work, they wanted to write a feature about me being a B movie writer. And I was like, I don't want to do that. And then my boss at the time was like, why don't you want people to know about it? I was like, well, it's R-rated material and not everyone might be into it. And why don't, nobody really, people would be interested. And so I started kind of slowly, I did that interview, and then I started slowly being more open about, yeah, that was me. And I did do that movie. And now I don't bring it up if somebody comes and says, hey, did you do The Girl in the Crawl Space? Yeah, that was me. But I used to not do that. But now I'm like, yeah, I'll talk I don't go out to work and go, hey, I'm also the guy that did these movies. And I never talk about it unless somebody brings it up. But I have gradually been more open about it over the years. But I think it really started, again, going back to my kids, when they were in high school. I worked on a Polonia Brothers movie called Black Mass. And a rumor started at my kids' high school that I had made a movie called Black Ass.
Oh my God.
Then it became that I was like a porno writer and a porno director.
I would have rolled with it.
Which was like, I wondered why more of the dads were sitting next to me at the basketball game. Like I figured something was going on, but I didn't know for the longest time that my kids were being tormented by being teased that their dad made pornos. And so I think that really honestly drove me to sort of say, I'll keep these two worlds separate. But now I'm much more open about it. If someone addresses me directly, I don't go to work and say, hey, I've been working on this movie, but like I'm taking tomorrow off from work and I'm planning on, I'm working on a screenplay. A part of the day I've got work to do, but I'm planning on knuckling down on that. But I didn't say at work, hey, I'm going to work on the screenplay this weekend. Right. Oh, what are you working on? Well, I'm writing this, blah, blah, blah. I don't do that, but I am much more. And you may find over time that you can be if somebody addresses you, you could be more open about it. But
Right.
Yeah, one of the
I work
doctors
with
I work with, once he found out, like he was so invested. Like we played a prank on my office manager, and he was like, "May it look like I got a broken nose. Somebody punched me in the face." I was like, "Okay, this is like a dream come true." I'm shaking because I'm like, "Hi, I'm just a peon in the mirror world with you," and it almost worked, but she knew it was me. She was like, "No, I know it was her."
Well, that's cool.
But then the other doctor, he was funny because they had a gingerbread contest in the hospital that I work at, and it was for all of the practices within the hospital. And he was like, "Why didn't you do like a creepy one?" Meanwhile, me, I'm like, "How do you know what I do? Who told you? Who told you this? How do you know who I am, sir?" So he'll ask me about it. Like I had to explain to him who Krampus was, and it was just a really funny conversation because everybody at the table was like, "Do you want to know, or are you just asking to be nice?" So yeah,
once we open the door, it doesn't shut.
yeah,
real
I was
easy.
like, if you open this door just a little bit, dude, we're about to be best friends. I'm gonna tell you everything. Yeah.
All right, John. Well, we're at an hour and a half into the podcast. We were so glad
golly.
we're so glad you agreed to join us today. It was a lively conversation. So, is there anything you want to tell
I'm glad
folks?
to be invited. I watch your I watch your podcast, and I was hoping to get invited on someday. So thank you.
Oh yeah, well,
Thank you
we're,
for
we're,
watching us. We appreciate it.
we love every new viewer.
This is a
we can
new
get.
thing for us, so we
Yeah.
appreciate it.
We certainly do. And I know you said don't ask you this, so I'm not going to ask you what you're working on, but is there anything you want to put out there to the general masses to make them aware of in John Oak Dalton's world?
Oh, people can find me. You can find me on Twitter. I'm at John Oak Dalton. I'm on Instagram at John Oak Dalton. You can friend me on Facebook. Those would be the main places you can find me. And I'm always willing to talk about movies and whatever people want. I'm hoping to start on a new project of my own soon, as well as work on some other projects with friends. And I know I've got at least 2 movies that I wrote for other people that are coming out in 22, and probably at this point, anything we're working on is coming out in 23. So we'll just see where the road goes.
Sounds awesome. Elena, let everyone know where we can find you.
I am Jukebox Baby 78 on Instagram as well as TikTok. If you are interested in body painting, horror makeup, haunt makeup, weird stuff that I like to do in my spare time, and general cringe, that is where I'm at there. On Facebook, I am Elena Marie. I think I'm also Jukebox Baby 78 on Twitter as well. You can see my random rantings there. A lot of Boulay Brothers content. So there's that. And also here with Charles on our podcast, Horror 421.
And I am Charles Campbell. I'm a small town horror author. You can find my books at valleyboypublications.com. You can find my Facebook page, Charles Campbell Authors, same name on Instagram. I have a Twitter account, but I hardly ever post on there. Elena does TikTok. I'm all out of TikTok. I'm not very well versed in TikTok. She'll have to help me with that.
There's buttons.
Yeah, there's buttons that I got to press. But anyway, thank you guys for listening today. And we'll see you next time on Horror 421, the podcast. You guys have a great day.
We hope you had a horrific time, lovelies. Thank you for tuning in to Horror 421, the podcast. Be sure to like us on YouTube and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.